All right, so today I'm going to get into a total storm inspection breakdown. This is going to be fantastic for my roofing contractors, and this is also going to be great for homeowners when you do get that photo report, which they should be giving to you, making sure that you know what you're looking at because there's a lot of different things that can possibly be chalked up as either storm damage, but a lot of the times it's not. So, big distinction I want to make before I get into everything we're going to be covering today is going to be storm damage versus mechanical. And then also, I'm going to touch on cosmetic versus structural as well. So, when these two are going to come into place is if something is actual legitimate storm damage, what that really looks like. And then also, when it's mechanical damage, meaning it's just something that could have potentially been damaged by something else, weed eater, what have you, just any kind of external factor. Or what I don't like to see on a roof as well is also vandalism. That's also going to be considered what I would call mechanical damage as well. So all the topics in today I'm going to be covering are going to be, we're going to do hail on shingles, we're going to do thermal cracking, we're going to do blisters, we're going to do pitted blisters, all different kinds of collateral damages, the most common ones you're going to see. And then lastly, I'm definitely going to touch on metal roofs as well, because that's where your cosmetic versus structural is really going to come into play. So let's jump right into it. First thing I'm going to do whenever I come to a property is I'm going to do a walk around. So I'm going to start with the front elevation. I'm actually going to go all the way around the home, and I'm going to do it in a specific order because we like to do our inspections, if it's a storm related inspection, just like an insurance adjuster is going to. So I'm going to step back, take a nice overview of the entire front of the home, and then I'm going to start walking around the home. First thing I'm going to look at is a mailbox, depending on how big the storm is. If it's a thinner mailbox as far as metal, or if it's like a copper mailbox, that's a really soft metal. It can definitely get dented, and that's something that should be covered if it is damaged. Next, I'm going to walk around anything that I can see it's visible from the ground. I'm going to take a photo of. So gutters, downspouts, window wraps, garage doors. What I'm really looking for is if you like took a marble and you slapped it. So what I typically am going to do is carry around a chalk pouch with me, and I'm going to drag that chalk across whatever surface that I'm trying to look at, and it should highlight a circle. If there's any kind of sharp line in it, if there's any kind of puncture, usually on a downspout, or if it's missing paint where that damage is, that's a good sign it's probably mechanical. And also when it comes to storms, they're sporadic, but they're usually going to be consistent as well. What do I mean by that? So if you're looking up and down a downspout and you only see damages 3 feet off the ground, there's a good chance it probably came from something else. Could have been a weed eater, could have been a set of pruners, could have been anything. Somebody kicking a ball, a trash can may have bumped it. But if you see a nice pretty circle and it's going all the way up the downspout, typically I like to look at stuff above your chest or your shoulder height. That's a good indication that it is potential for hail damage. Now, when you're looking at a gutter, there's 2 different kinds of damages from storms that I usually see, and this is going to be directional. If the storm came from the backside of the home and I'm looking at the front of the gutter, what you're typically going to see is a dimple, meaning it's going to be jutted out. So the dent should be coming out at me. If you see it on the other side of the home, what it should look like is a dent on the face of the gutter, which is usually pretty rare if I'm being honest. It takes really wind-driven hail for it to dent the face of the gutter. The way it usually damages gutters is that lip before it goes into the pan. That lip a lot of the time will get damaged. And keep in mind, if it's a steel gutter system, which is usually a more old school way to do it now, or if it's an aluminum, as you can imagine, a steel versus aluminum, aluminum's a good bit of a thinner metal, meaning it's going to get more beat up. It takes much bigger hail to be able to damage a steel downspout versus a aluminum downspout or gutter. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. What is the best way to figure this out really quickly? If you have a magnet handy, that's a great way to do it. If you have a magnet, it'll stick to that steel. If it doesn't stick to the downspout, it's probably an aluminum gutter. So another great way, this is something that a State Farm adjuster actually taught me, is if you don't want to use chalk, get your hands all messy and dirty, what you can do is you carry a flashlight. Carry something ideally that's about 2,000 lumens or more. And what you can do is you can pop that flash on and shoot it up against the downspout or across a gutter, and it'll highlight wherever those dents are to where you can take a nice pretty picture of it. When it comes to garage doors, similar thing, shine a flashlight or use chalk, but you're gonna have to take your time with this a lot of the time. And it's usually going to have to be bigger hail that's gonna damage a garage door. Why? Usually because of where it's located. It's located very low on a home. They're only about 8 feet tall, and then it's also inset. So if you think about it, it takes pretty good wind-driven hail to actually damage a garage door. Next thing I want to cover that's super, super common is window screens. So if you see window screens, the way to separate from mechanical damage versus storm damage is obviously if it's wind, it's just going to tear that guy right out. But if it's hail, you're looking for streaking, you're looking for like something that looks like an upside down triangle. It's usually going to bunch a couple of the individual pieces of the screen together. If it's mechanical, it's going to look more torn. A lot of the times I see if people open their windows inside, dogs can get to it, and it's very consistent on like the bottom part of the window screen, but you're not going to see it as much on the top. Those are some of the factors that you kind of want to look for. Another thing that's very, very common where we did a bunch of them in specific areas in Georgia is going to be a window wrap. So window wraps are becoming a lot more common to be installed just about with any new window replacement. But window wraps are just essentially thin aluminum that is going to be cut and it encases the frame of your window. The bottom sill, these get damaged a lot during a hailstorm, and it's a thinner metal. So whenever there's even a 1/2 inch hailstorm or a little bit bigger, you're typically going to see dents on these. Very easy to chalk. I do caution you to not use a whole bunch of chalk though, because if you're not ready to wipe it away, this is something that's going to take a little bit of time for it to actually rinse off from a couple rains. Same thing with window screens. I will double back a little bit. I never recommend chalking a window screen. I did it a couple times when I first started, but it is very, very difficult to get off with the rain. So unless you're willing to break out the hose and you're confident it's going to get replaced, I wouldn't just go around chalking up people's window screens. One other common thing that gets certainly overlooked whenever you're walking around a home is going to be looking at the handrails. If it's a painted deck, a lot of the times if it's a really severe hailstorm, it can actually chip the paint, and insurance companies are certainly on the hook for paying for pressure washing and restaining or repainting that product. So something else to definitely keep in mind when you're doing the walk around. Now, let's get up on top of the roof. So we're on top of the roof. What's the first thing I'm gonna go do? I'm gonna go look at your soft metals on the roof. This is where you're typically going to see the most evidence of hail right off the bat. And you're gonna, same thing as if you're doing a downspout, you can use a flashlight or you can use chalk, drag a piece of chalk. It should highlight wherever the circles are. Again, these usually don't get replaced every single roof, so be cautious. If it is just loaded with dents and it's not a very big hailstorm that just recently came through, could have been from an older storm. So making sure you're seeing that consistency as well. But if you see a bunch of nice pretty circles up there that's consistent with the hail date and the storm data that came down, boom, now you have some more collateral damages on top of the roof. But again, you're looking for those nice pretty circles. Same thing on any kind of other soft metals. So your box vents that can be up on the roof, your power vents occasionally. Power vents are a little bit thicker. Sometimes they get damaged, sometimes they don't. If the chimney cap is safely accessible, go ahead and look at that as well. And then now let's get to the shingles. So this is where it takes a real experienced eye. This is where it's critical to get on a lot of different roofs and making sure you're with somebody that knows what they're looking at before ever asking a homeowner to move forward, because there's a lot of cases where collateral damages can be present and shingles are not damaged. I just got on one yesterday. The collateral damage was crazy on it, but clearly what must have happened is these components were reused, which I highly doubt. Or maybe when that severe hailstorm did come through, the shingles were just almost brand new, so they just didn't end up taking any damage. So when you're looking at shingles, there's a lot of different things you can see on a shingle. If it is legitimate hail damage, there's a couple characteristics you want to look for. You want to look for the granules to be embedded into the shingle, which should be pretty evident. You want to see almost like a dent. It should be almost concave. This is going to be hard to depict in an actual picture, but you should be able to get an idea from taking a bunch of pictures. And also, it should be somewhat consistent throughout the slopes of where the storm came in. So if it came in from the southwest, your south slopes and your west slopes should retain the most damage. Your other slopes should have a little bit, but typically not going to be as bad. And you want to be able to feel it. And I know I may get some pushback on this, but if it's truly a hail hit, it will feel like a bruised banana. When you push it, it's going to be softer. So touch the area next to where you believe it's a hail hit. If it's hard, touch that area and it's soft, circular, relatively circular in shape, impacted granules, boom, there's a very good chance you're looking at hail. If it's something called a blister usually happens if there's improper ventilation or if that roof is just getting too hot from the sun. And a lot of times it's going to happen just on an older roof. A blister, the really good indications of it being a blister and not a hail hit is blisters can come in all sizes and shapes. they're usually going to be pretty consistent across the roof as well, which is a pretty good indication. And you're also usually going to see fibers. Fibers meaning it's an asphalt shingle roof. So as it starts to break down over time, the fibers are actually going to start to show. This is when you look at a roof and you look at it in the sun and it's starting to kind of have like a sheen to it. The edges of the shingles are starting to get shiny. That is the roof breaking down. That's that fiber starting to show. A typical blister is usually going to have fibers in it. And also if you think it's hail and you touch it and it's still hard, that's a really good indicator that it's a blister and not a hail impact. A pitted blister is a little bit different. Usually going to happen from a similar reason. Pitted blistering, a lot of times it happens though because of improper ventilation, or sometimes it's even a manufacturer defect to where the shingle gets hot, and what happens is certain granules essentially just pop off the shingle. So it doesn't look like a typical blister, so it's a pitted blister. So when you do poke it, it's going to be hard, but they're usually going to be kind of inconsistent in shape across the roof. Some will be very, very small, some will be a little bit larger. Thermal cracking is also very common, especially on older roofs that are, again, improperly ventilated. Again, just tapping on the fact that ventilation is probably one of the most important aspects of a roof and making sure that you get the proper lifespan out of it. Thermal cracking occurs pretty often and it's very, very evident. As you can imagine, it's usually a crack across multiple shingles. It looks almost like a lightning bolt sometimes, and certain shingles are way, way more prone to this. There was actually a shingle called an Atlas Chalet where I see it on every single roof that I get on. Thermal cracking is something that needs to be monitored. It's definitely not great for a shingle, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to leak right away. So if you do see extensive thermal cracking on your roof, it may be an indication that it's probably assigned to get a roof sooner rather than later. But just know if you have a couple spots here and a couple spots there, it's not an end-all be-all by any means. But also, if you see a thermal crack and then you see some circles inside it, be hesitant. Make sure to poke them, feel it, make sure it's actually legitimate hail, because a lot of the times the thermal cracking can expand in certain areas in the shingle. But if it's in the middle of a long stretch of a thermal crack, there's a good chance it's not legitimate storm damage. And then lastly, I have a video that I'll put up as well, but vandalism is super, super common in this industry. It's not super common when it comes to hail typically. The way you can usually know if it is fake hail, then it's been done, I see this from time to time, is it's usually going to be in really accessible areas. So it's going to be at the top of the ridges where somebody can physically hang on and easily damage it, or it's going to be close to your valleys, which is where slopes meet at an inward angle, where it's really accessible to walk. Usually if it's manufactured or a vandalism claim, you're not going to see it all sporadic throughout the entire slope on every part of the roof. Any part that's truly hard to get to, people are not going to spend hours up there damaging the roof. So not only are they doing something that's illegal, they're usually pretty lazy as well, which is why they're doing something illegal. So when they're showing you photos, making sure they're not just showing you specific photos, but they're showing you overviews of the entire roof, it's going to save you a lot of time and headache, believe me. Next, I want to touch on cosmetic versus structural. This is more or less going to pertain to metal roofing. The one thing I will touch on too, because I'm seeing this become more prevalent in insurance policies, is be wary. Cosmetic versus structural means if it's a cosmetic dent, meaning it's just a dent in some metal, even on your downspout or gutter, some policies do have something called a cosmetic exclusion, meaning even if it's dented, they'll admit that it's damaged, but they aren't on the hook for paying for it. So something to keep in mind if you're not familiar with an insurance policy, to double check, especially if you have a metal roof. This can come into play a lot, because just because a big hailstorm came by and it put some dents in the middle of the panels doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to get covered. These can just be cosmetic dents that don't necessarily obstruct the flow of water or shorten the lifespan of the metal. However, there's a difference. Structural damage is something where it hits the ribs, or if it hits where a nail is actually fastening the roof down and it affects the gasketing, the way it's holding. Technically, it breaks that seal, and then now you're susceptible to leaks. That's what we considered structural damage, and that's when metal roofs truly need to get replaced. So in Georgia, we don't get crazy, crazy big hailstorms. We do get occasionally big enough hailstorms to where metal roofs do get damaged enough, but even having that cosmetic versus structural could be the difference in even getting a claim paid out to begin with. But just know, just because you do have some dents in the middle of panels, contractors need to be showing you structural damage when it comes to the metal roof, because it's a much safer bet that it's, number one, actually a problem, and then two, that it's something that's actually worth taking to an insurance carrier. So hope this total breakdown has been super, super helpful. I appreciate you guys watching. See you on the next one.